right, moving on to this now. Congress and the Justice Department and alleged victims are all demanding answers after the death of Jeffrey Epstein over the weekend. The wealthy hedge fund manager was found dead in his New York City jail cell Saturday morning. Initial reports suggest it was an apparent suicide. Epstein was accused of running a sex trafficking ring and abusing dozens of young girls. Mola Lenghi is outside the Manhattan jail with a closer look.
The medical examiner's office performed an autopsy on Epstein's body yesterday, but says they are waiting for more information before drawing any conclusions. A source tells CBS News that Epstein hanged himself in a jail cell here at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, which is raising some serious questions about how exactly he was able to do that. You remember it was just a few weeks ago that Epstein survived a previous apparent suicide attempt.
A representative for workers at the Metropolitan Correctional Center tells CBS News the death of Jeffrey Epstein here is not a surprise. She says staffing is completely inadequate, with workers putting in more than 60 hours a week, leaving them overwhelmed and not alert. It had been just over a month since the feds announced Epstein's arrest.
The charges allege that Epstein sexually abused young girls by enticing them to engage in sex acts for money.
And less than 3 weeks after sources told CBS News Epstein was found semi-conscious inside his cell with bruising around his neck. The New York Times reports Epstein was supposed to have been checked by guards every 30 minutes, but that procedure was not followed the night before his death. In a statement, Attorney General William Barr said Epstein's death raises serious questions. He announced the Inspector General is opening an investigation into the circumstances surrounding it. The apparent suicide happened just hours after the release of some 2,000 pages of documents from a prior lawsuit, including testimony from alleged victim Virginia Giuffre.
You're screaming on the inside and you don't know how to let it come out, and you just become this numb figure.
She claimed Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, directed her to have sex with former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, former Maine Senator George Mitchell, and Britain's Prince Andrew, among others. They've all denied the allegations, and none of them have been arrested or charged with any crime.
For all of the Epstein victims, it's going to take a long time to really get their minds around this.
Lisa Bloom represents several women who claim they were abused by Epstein. She says it's important for others to come forward so that everyone involved can be brought to justice.
Let's get to the bottom of this. You have nothing to fear anymore because Jeffrey Epstein is gone.
Legal experts say federal prosecutors will ultimately drop the criminal case against Jeffrey Epstein, but will continue to investigate any potential co-conspirators who may have helped him operate his alleged sex trafficking operation. Prosecutors have said that they would continue to do that. Meanwhile, defense attorneys for alleged victims of Epstein have said they will continue to pursue and to file civil cases against Epstein's estate. Vlad, Meg?
All right, Mola, thank you very much. For more on this, let's bring in 48 Hours producer Murray Weiss. Good to see you.
Hi, good to be here.
So, Murray, you've done a lot of reporting and investigating on Epstein. In fact, you were one of the producers, reporters who was able to confirm that Mr. Epstein had taken his life in jail. Tell us what you're learning about the circumstances surrounding his apparent suicide.
Well, the circumstances are beyond comprehension in many ways. It appears that he attempted suicide several weeks ago and was in a unit for people who were on suicide watch. Everybody I spoke to back then expected him to be in that situation pretty much forever, and to get out of it you need many layers of Bureau of Prison, you need the U.S. Attorney's Office knowing it, his lawyers have to be involved. When word came that he was dead, the same people expressed unbelievable shock that he had somehow been transferred out of that unit and into a cell by himself where he had already tried to commit suicide. Previously, he tried to hang himself. They found him with some cloth around his neck, likely a blanket, I believe, and it had been lashed to a cell door, and he tried to hang himself. Now, obviously, with all these documents coming out and him being completely still at risk, he was able to be alone in a cell and commit the suicide. Obviously, there's a million questions how this was allowed to happen.
So many questions, and the Department of Justice is now investigating his death because now there are reports coming out that he was not on suicide watch any longer, despite just trying to attempt suicide a few days before. So what is behind that?
I can tell you that the people that I talked to when they were informed, and these are people of high level of government, were informed that he was dead in a cell, they're still in shock that this happened. So I think the investigation here is extremely important, obviously, to the victims to know exactly what happened. It's important to know that nothing nefarious happened, that this was, if it was in fact a screw up by the Bureau of Prisons or a psychologist made a move. I think the defense attorneys must have had a role in pushing for this, for him to be taken out of suicide watch. I think, this reminds me a little bit of the TWA 800 case, where the conspiracy theories and the concern to dispel all the rumors and what might be the false theories are important for the victims to know exactly what happened here and for the Bureau of Prisons to prevent this from happening.
Yeah, because as you say, there are a lot of conspiracy theories that are emerging. In fact, the President of the United States himself retweeted a crazy conspiracy theory. We don't want to share any of that here with the audience, but because as you say, Murray, oftentimes when we can't understand why something happens, we tend to speculate as to what may have happened, and you've seen it, Jack Ruby assassinating, right? I mean, like, that people have had all these sorts of crazy conspiracy theories. The question, though, and Julie K. Brown was here. She's the reporter for the Miami Herald who's done a lot of reporting on this. She says that a lot of the victims are worried because they don't know exactly what happened, and that gives them some fear if they're going to continue to move forward.
Listen, the Bureau of Prisons is part of the criminal justice system. They're supposed to protect these people and ensure that they get their day in court and that the victims also see that justice is done to them. Mr. Epstein may be dead and he's gotten the ultimate penalty here, the death penalty, but it's not for him to decide what his punishment is and when he gets it. In fact, if he is in so much pain and fear that he wanted to kill himself, I would humbly suggest there's a lot of victims who wish that every day he woke up in prison with that pain until he dies of natural causes. So the Bureau of Prisons here, even though they're on the food chain of budgets in the criminal justice system, is the last to get the real money, and they're hopelessly always understaffed, and nobody really cares about jails. This is like a state-of-the-art prison here in New York City. The Metropolitan Correctional Center has housed some of the most famous criminals in the history of this country. That goes from as recently as El Chapo to World Trade terrorists to John Gotti. Incidents like this don't happen there. They're not supposed to happen there, and this is clearly something that, without a rush to judgment, the government has to get all the facts here to make sure that the victims and the public both know that money, wealth, power didn't play a role in him being placed in a cell by himself and allowed to do this.
So Epstein tried to commit suicide weeks before his death. I wanted to clarify that, not days before it. But looking forward now, Murray, what's going to happen to his wealth, his property?
I think there's going to be so many civil suits against him and his estate that when that's all settled out, that the Epstein estate is going to be drained. If I was related to him, and I know he has, properties perhaps with other relatives, that I'd be doing all I can to protect my own interests. I think his estate is going to be completely dissolved. There are other people, though, who have enormous exposure in this case, people who may have assisted him, people who have provided money with him. I mean, this man lived an incredible life of partying and debauchery and criminal behavior, and people were facilitating it, were part of it, were aware of it. I'd say that they have civil issues, if not criminal issues as well.
Wow. All right. 48 Hours producer Murray Weiss, thank you so much for your insight. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.